Hello, friends and enemies, and welcome back to the channel. I am your super fluffy host, and today I will finally be telling you the story of the first ever game of D&D that I GM'd. It was 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons. This takes place the day after my very first story, of my very first game, so if you haven't seen that one yet, I would recommend going and checking it out. I'll link it down below. It is definitely something. Anyway, so on with the story. This is going to be a two-parter, almost certainly, because it is going to be very long. I will upload the second version of this, well, I guess part 2 of this, shortly after this one, so hopefully you'll be able to quickly go from one to the other. But with that said, the story. So, as I said, this took place the day after the first game. I went and talked with the GM of that game and asked if he would be okay with me GMing. He was reluctant, but finally agreed, stating something that was almost certainly an insult, but unfortunately is also a phrase that stuck with me for a while. And I hate to admit it, but it was bad D&D is better than no D&D. And that is, like I said, something that has stuck with me for a very long time. Not as something bad, but as a general advice to look at when looking at a D&D game. Yeah, I know now that no D&D is better than bad D&D, but probably until this year, maybe last year, I stuck with that old saying. But anyway, so he agreed. We got the other two players together, and we all sat down for character creation. So without further ado, the players. We had me, of course, as GM. We had Stu, the previous GM, saying his name this way because he really thought his characters were Marty Stews. He played two characters that he refused to show anyone. He would hide his character sheets, block people from viewing them, etc. He really didn't want people to see them. Massive red flags, but nope, bad D&D is better than no D&D was probably the biggest red flag to start with. Then we had Gwen. I don't actually know why I remember that name. That was the name of her character, and it was a completely just generic fighter. But for some reason, that's just a name that's stuck in my head this entire time. And finally, we have Druid. Who is playing a Druid? He was just there. I feel really bad for him because he stuck around the entire time, and I think he really wanted to get into the game. But with Stu and to an extent me, yeah, he rolled dice and was there. And then we have Druid's Animal Companion. Yes, it gets its own slot. It wasn't actually played by anyone but me and Druid, but it's being listed because, Stu mentioned that since he was playing a Druid, he could have an animal companion. So he said, okay, I'll take a wolf. And I said, all right, roll stats for your wolf. I think Stu was going to interrupt because you're just supposed to take an animal out of like the Dungeon Master's Guide or whatever. But then just sort of stared as the first 18 was rolled. And then the second. And then the third. And then the fourth. This random wolf animal companion had straight 18s for stats. Yes, straight 18s on the animal companion. The wolf was smarter, more charismatic, and wiser than anyone in the party. Maybe stronger as well. Well, no, there was some other 18s rolled. But yeah, it was up there. Naturally, after this, Stu grabbed his D6s and hid them away and pulled out a different set of D6s, getting a bit upset that Druid was taking all the luck out of them. I found it kind of funny, but now I find it kind of that was a reasonable thing to do. Superstition and all now. Even though I don't think I've used physical dice in ages, I would probably still want my dice back if somebody rolled that many 18s. But anyway, so the party was set, except for one final character. Because I decided to roll up a character. Why am I saying this? As it was an NPC, it was just going to be with them for the initial part of it, because I wanted to get used to rolling characters as well, because I had these high hopes that this would lead to further sessions, more games, and etc., and it didn't. But still, I rolled up a character. And this was by far my favorite thing to do. I have rolled up hundreds of characters since then. Hundreds. I rolled up over a dozen for this game alone. Any random NPC that said even a single word to the party, they probably had a character sheet. And while they were almost all just generic warriors, because that was how they were super easy to make, they still all had a detailed character sheet, equipment, backstories, everything. I don't know how many hours. I probably spent more hours on character sheets for random NPCs than maybe even the story. Since most of it was a bit ad-libbed, since we did a game every single day. And with all the schoolwork and other responsibilities, I didn't really have much time to put into it. But plenty of time for character sheets. Okay, I've gone way off. Anyway, so the party gets together. They're not in a tavern. Instead, they are in an encampment at the edge of the woods. You see, some weird thing has happened to the woods here, the forest. Every single night, it shifts and changes. A road that might have been perfectly safe and okay one day suddenly leads nowhere. Or maybe it goes from being a standard 30 road to it's now paved with cobblestone. Or even other bizarre materials. There's even telling that one day the road was completely gold. Naturally, they didn't run into a road of gold because they would have tried to steal it all, but still, it's just one of those things. Not only that, but bizarre monsters and creatures were coming from the woods, causing all sorts of problems. And so, to figure out what was going on, the party was given a magical map that would let them, as they went through the woods, it would sort of absorb the chaotic energies and let them, find the perfect safe route through. And then copies of that could be made. I realize that's probably some sort of extremely powerful artifact, but, new DM, I figured, oh, hey, a plain old basic map that always points you the safe route through. Yeah, that's probably pretty common in a magical area. This one's just extra special because it changes with the forest. I think Stu realized that this would have been super powerful because he immediately threatened the NPC that had it. His reasoning was that if they had such an amazing map, then they were probably going to be super trusted with amazing gear as well. And so he could kill them and take all the gear unless they handed it over. I stared at him a little bit confused, confirmed that he was threatening the NPC. He said yes. I shrugged and said, okay, let's go. Pulled out the character sheet for this NPC, which turned out to be a level 20 druid. Placed it on the table, looked to his two companions and said, are you going to help him? They immediately said no. I said, okay, so it's going to be you and your two characters versus Druid and Gwen, the NPC Druid, the NPC that's joining you, and there's about 2 dozen or 3 dozen guards in the camp that'll also be fighting you. So does that sound good? He sort of stared at me, looked at his character sheets, at this NPC Druid's character sheets, looked at his companions, sort of sunk into his chair and said, no, I'm not going to do that. Let's pretend that didn't happen. I shrugged, said, oh, okay. And then Gwen immediately got up, said she refused to play in a game if it's going to be like this with just random murder, and left, leaving her character sheet there. Which Stu immediately grabbed and said that he was playing this character now. Because, according to him, there always had to be 5 PCs in a party. Or not 5, but 4 PCs in a party. And so now he was going to be playing 3 characters. Druid checked out a bit at this point. Don't blame him at all. And yeah, the party got on with it. So I had created a sheet for random encounters and started rolling on it as they walked through this mystical, bizarre forest. And I got nothing. I rolled again and got nothing. I rolled again and got nothing. I rolled 5 times and got nothing all 5 times. There was only like 4 or 5 spots that had nothing wrote on them. The rest were like random animals, or maybe they'd see a traveler. They just ended up on nothing every single time. Finally, I decided, you know what? Screw the dice. I'm just going to create an encounter right here, right now. And quickly had them encounter an overturned wagon with some injured NPCs unconscious around it. Druid went up to one of them that was a little bit away from the rest and started to heal them. Meanwhile, Stu took his 3 characters and said that he was murdering all the unconscious NPCs so that he could take their loot. Yeah. Fearing Druid suddenly decided, nope, I'm out, and just walking away, I said, okay, you start slitting, as you slit the throats of the first person, you hear sounds in the woods, and these monsters come rushing out, now that they've smelled fresh blood. And basically, there were some weird mutant monster things that started dragging off the unconscious bodies. And in the end, because Stu decided that we should overturn this cart and take everything in it instead, and just let the monsters have all those bodies, because the cart will probably be worth more. Yeah, the cart was broken. He ignored that part that I had said. And of course, Druid wasn't paying attention anymore. Yeah, I probably should have put a stop to it, but it's first game. Gotta get through it. Gotta do it. So I was like, okay, all those unconscious people, except for the one Druid helped, have been dragged off. Them and their gear gone forever. You managed to get the cart flipped over, but as I had mentioned before, the wheels are broken, and so the whole thing crashes to the ground. And now you've got a couple of monsters left to fight you. So they had their encounter with the monsters, killed them off. Stu complaining the entire time how they had taken all of his loot and wanting to run off and get that loot. But of course, I point out that Druid and the old NPC and now the new NPC would probably just let you go and finish the mission. He didn't have the magic map. The random NPC that was fought with him had it. And so he begrudgingly agreed that he would continue through the forest. But he was going to shove this cart the entire way as long as he could, which just ended up damaging it and breaking it more. But I guess it gave them some firewood for their first night in the woods. So I rolled a few more times, got more nothing on the random encounter sheet I had made. I threw away the random encounter sheet and just had like another small encounter with some bizarre animals before they finally made it out of the woods and to the massive hub trade city. It was supposed to be, well, no, technically it was just going to be this one place that they were in, but I had it thought out as this big hub. They would have gotten all kinds of money that they could spend on stuff here, but instead, since only one NPC had survived that encounter, they got basically nothing. And of course, the 2 NPCs were going to be leaving them at this point. So Druid and the 2 NPCs were going to go talk to the head guard who would be taking the map. Stu refused to go. He wanted to do shopping. So I said, okay. Turned to Druid and asked what he would like to do with the head guard, and he just shrugged. So I said, all right. Did a little thing with him. They went to the head guard, got another quest, and then went over to Stu. He checked out the shops and found one that was selling gunpowder-based weapons. It was just like a random sort of one-shot weapon that would ignore AC and just instantly do damage. Naturally, he wanted to try to steal those, even though they were only one use only. So I was like, okay, so you want to try to steal from the guy that has a bunch of guns, the guard here, and his apprentices? Hold on, let me double check how much damage these will do in a single turn. I said, how much HP do you have again? He quickly said that he was just joking. He wasn't actually going to rob the place. I said, oh, all right, okay, well, all right. Never mind then. And he did a little bit more shopping, didn't buy anything because I guess a single-use item that was kind of expensive was a bit more than he was willing to spend money on. They found another shop, went in, and wanted to have something actually happen. I had him find this old rusted sword that seemed to have something special about it. With the shopkeeper saying that how they had been sold it by a adventurer, and it had been pristine and magical, but over a few days it had just rusted to this, and they weren't sure why. They had tried cleaning it, but nothing seemed to work. And so they got it for super cheap. It was more powerful than their current weapon, so they took it and got on with it. Met up with the rest of the party and found out their new quest. They were escorting a merchant from the town to the small port village, where they're basically going to be giving an evacuation order. They wanted all the outlying towns and villages to evacuate to the major hub city. So they agreed. There's a bunch of random junk in the cart. Like I mentioned, like some old suits of armor and weapons and booze and some random animals, that sort of thing. So they started on their journey. Not long after leaving the town, the landscape suddenly shifted to this like bizarre hellscape of an area. Like the sun was red, the ground was cracked and broken. It looked like a giant wasteland. And they saw other large, strange monsters out there, which they ignored as they continued on. And that's when they heard a cry for help. Stu threatened everybody to not go help the NPC, to let the NPC that was yelling for help and trying to get to them get killed by the monster, so that they could go then loot the dead NPC. This led to the first TPK, and probably should have been the end of the game, but... So, the party being threatened decided not to go help the NPC. The NPC died. This bizarre creature did something strange, and then started heading after the party to attack them. So they started fighting it, and it was a tough fight. It seemed to be healing a little bit, as Stu realized that his weapon did fire damage each time it hit. What he didn't put together was that each time he hit it and did fire damage, the monster healed. So he decided that, you know what, this must be like a troll, and I'll hit it with fire to stop it from healing. So he hit it with fire, and it healed. Confused, he decided to start hitting it with more fire, which healed it more. What went from a tough battle that they were winning turned into, as mentioned, a TPK, as the now fully healed monster just murdered the party. And of course, he stood there confused. I pointed out the fact that it was healing each time he was casting fire on it. So why didn't he stop casting fire? And he just got upset and refused to say anything. So I said, alright, you know what? Do you want to redo this thing? He said yes. Druid shrugged. He was just rolling dice at this point. So we do it again. This time they go save the NPC. The fight is much easier because it's not healing now. Though he also notices that magic seems to be hard to do around this creature with it like this. And they kill it. The NPC thanks them, says that the monster was giving off some strange field that was disrupting magic, hands off a magic ring, and then immediately teleports away before Stu can do anything. He's disappointed because, naturally, he wanted to kill the NPC. But instead, they got a magic ring that was like... It was some magic damage resistance of some kind, elemental resistance, I don't remember at this point. He gave it to, like, the random NPC, which, by the way, those two random NPCs that were supposed to be leaving them were still with the party. because Stu threatened to murder them in the middle of town, mind you, if they didn't join. So I just said, you know what, they join just to get things moving. So yeah. So they continue on. They get through the woods and find themselves back at the big hub city. Only the sun is still red. It hasn't switched positions at all from like the entire day they've been traveling. And the gate is locked. Not only is the gate locked, but there's some bizarre field where they can't actually see past anything. Like if they step back and try to get up on something to look over the wall, they see nothing. And that's when they get attacked. These monsters start swarming them. Incredibly easy to kill, only like 2 HP, but each time one of them dies, it explodes and coats the person that killed it in this, I guess, blood basically. But it has a weird smell to it, which attracts more monsters. Each time they kill one, another comes out to attack. So it's like you kill the first one, 2 come out. Kill those 2, 3 come out. And more come out, swarming each person that kills one in melee. Finally, the merchant, who had been standing in the back hiding, points out that the door, the special lock on the door, has the same engraving as on Stu's sword. So Stu realizes that, oh, it must be a key, which admittedly was kind of impressive that he immediately realized that. So he goes over, inserts the sword, which unlocks the door and causes it to open. Some weird magic is expelled through the town, which causes all the creatures to immediately go running. It also spooks like the ox and other random animals in the cart. But with the creatures hiding at the edge of the wood, ready to attack again, they run inside, remove the sword from the lock, which causes the doors to close. And with that, I'm going to end this session, or this episode. So I hope you all enjoyed. And of course, like I said, I will be uploading a part 2 not too much longer after this one. But with that, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like the video, comment on the video, and subscribe to the channel. And I shall see you next time.